One quiet night in July 1918, a royal family stood before their executioners, unaware that the empire they ruled for 3 centuries was about to vanish in smoke and gunfire. Within minutes, the House of Romanov was erased from history, yet never from memory. What followed was not the end, but a century of whispers, imposters, and the haunting question that refused to die.
On the 17th of July, 1918, within a tranquil home in the Russian city of Yekaterinburg, the Romanov royal family remained paralyzed by fear. Tsar Nicholas II, Empress Alexandra, and their 5 children stood before a group of armed men in the soft glow of dim lamplight, oblivious to the fact that their last moments were upon them.
Intensified, the Bolsheviks focused on the Ipatiev house, marked here the final destination for
The shots rang out unexpectedly. In a matter of minutes, the imperial family, once rulers of one of the world's largest empires, disappeared. The Bolshevik forces who carried out the killings believed they were erasing a symbol of the old world. For them, this was not justice, it was a revolution marked by blood.
But soon, murmurs began to circulate throughout Europe. Could one of the Romanov daughters have lived on? Several individuals asserted that the young Grand Duchesses had stitched jewels and diamonds into their corsets, causing the bullets to deflect off their bodies. Some claimed that a mysterious woman had fled that dreadful night. After a span of 2 years, a young woman was discovered in a hospital in Berlin following a failed attempt at taking her own life. She referred to herself as Anna and asserted that she was Princess Anastasia Romanov. Her face, her posture, even her voice brought to mind the lost princess for many. Some believed her, others viewed her merely as a desperate stranger grasping at a legend. For many years, scholars, detectives, and descendants of those who served the Romanovs have sought to uncover the truth. They examined bones, letters, and photographs, each clue deepening the mystery. What they ultimately uncovered was not just the tale of a vanished princess, but one of the darkest and most haunting chapters in royal history. The Romanovs did not meet their end in a grand execution that was observed by the world. They were quietly murdered in a basement erased from their empire, yet never forgotten in its memory.
The radiocarbon dating contradicts
Even now, the deaths of Nicholas II, Alexandra Feodorovna, Alexei Romanov, and Anastasia Romanov stand out as some of the most debated occurrences in Russian history. What started as a political execution transformed into a mystery that spanned 100 years, capturing the interest of numerous investigators, historians, and conspiracy theorists from across the globe.
Decades later, forensic investigation and DNA.
The Romanov dynasty had been in power in Russia since the year 1613, overseeing its evolution into one of the mightiest empires on the planet. For over 300 years, the family symbolized stability, faith, and divine authority. In Russian tradition, the Tsar and Tsarina were viewed as semi-divine figures, selected by God to guide their people. Nicholas II was perceived by numerous peasants as both a ruler and a spiritual protector, embodying the living symbol of the Russian Orthodox Church.
To a history shrouded in both gold and darkness.
The contrast could not be more clear.
Nicholas II and Alexandra Feodorovna were not distant from their people. They spoke with affection about the humble Russian peasant, admiring their faith, endurance, and simplicity. Yet, Despite their affection, the divide between the imperial palace and the poverty of the countryside widened with each passing year, preparing the ground for the storm that would eventually engulf the Romanovs. The devotion to God was central to Nicholas II's reign, and for generations, the people of Russia, both peasants and nobles, held the belief that the Tsar governed by divine will. The Romanov family held their faith with unwavering certainty, their belief steadfast even as the world surrounding them started to fall apart. Yet, the lives of everyday Russians were filled with struggle and sorrow. A multitude of peasants resided in single-room huts, cohabiting the space with livestock, resting on dirt floors under roofs that scarcely shielded them from the chill. As poverty deepened and hunger spread, belief in the Tsar's divine power started to wane. As the 20th century began, Russia found itself caught between two realms, an age-old monarchy holding tightly to its traditions, and a restless populace striving for modernity. Nicholas II continued to govern as if it were the 18th century, upholding absolute autocracy while revolutionary ideas circulated through the factories and streets. "I shall uphold autocracy as firmly and faithfully as my late father," Nicholas II declared at his coronation. Yet that promise sealed his fate. The empire could no longer support both the authority of the crown and the demand for equality. The collision was bound to happen. The breaking point arrived on a chilly day in January in St. Petersburg, when thousands of workers marched towards the Winter Palace, carrying icons and petitions, earnestly pleading for protection and reform. The day would be remembered in history as Bloody Sunday, the moment when the bond between Nicholas II and his people was shattered forever. On Sunday, the 22nd of January, 1905, more than 3,000 people, men, women, and children, marched towards the residence of Nicholas II in St. Petersburg. It was intended as a heartfelt appeal, a display to highlight the intolerable working conditions and poverty endured by the laborers of Russia.
January 1905.
The marchers held icons and petitions, urging for fairness and relief. As they drew near the Winter Palace, the Cossack guards discharged warning shots overhead. When the crowd would not disperse, the soldiers began to shoot. More than 130 individuals lost their lives, and countless others were trampled in the chaos that ensued. Nicholas II was not in St. Petersburg on that day, nor had he given the order for the attack, yet the tragedy became forever linked to his name. The trust of the people in their little father disappeared in a single night. The event that became known as Bloody Sunday sparked the anger that would eventually evolve into revolution. Russia, during the reign of Nicholas II, faced significant challenges, including widespread poverty, hunger, and political turmoil. Then, in 1914, the world was drawn into the Great War. In response to the looming threat of a German invasion, Nicholas II made the decision to mobilize Russian troops, an action that Germany viewed as a declaration of hostility. In just a few days, Germany declared war on Russia. The empire found itself ill-equipped for the magnitude of the conflict. The armies of Germany were superior in training, equipped with better resources, and exhibited a level of organization that was unmatched. Russian soldiers, lacking adequate supplies and leadership, endured devastating losses. By the war's end, over 3 million Russian soldiers had lost their lives, and close to 1 million civilians had succumbed to disease and starvation.
Thousands more lives than any battle.
The cost was beyond what one could bear. The economy of Russia fell apart. Its armies broke down, and its people faced starvation. Throughout the country, peasants and workers directed their frustration at Nicholas II, perceiving him not as the guardian of Russia, but as the embodiment of its pain. The Romanov family, once enveloped in love and grandeur, now found themselves teetering on the brink of disaster. As revolutions spread across Russia, the Romanov family continued to live surrounded by luxury, seemingly unaware of how far the nation had fallen. As countless soldiers lost their lives on the battlefields of the Great War, feelings of resentment towards Nicholas II and Alexandra Feodorovna escalated beyond measure. The empire that had stood for 300 years was collapsing from within. By 1917, the pressure grew too intense to bear. The provisional government, under the leadership of Alexander Kerensky, called for change, leaving Nicholas II with no option but to step down from the throne. He thought that by stepping down, he could protect both the monarchy and the safety of his family. Nicholas II signed the abdication while still at the military front, 600 miles from home. The choice was born from solitude and hopelessness. He believed it was the finest path to rescue Russia, yet in that very act he determined the destiny of his dynasty. The guards no longer referred to him as Tsar. He was simply Colonel Romanov. The imperial family found themselves devoid of all titles, confined within the walls of their own palace. Though officially held for their safety, the reality was evident. The Romanovs had turned into prisoners of the revolution they had not anticipated. The guards no longer referred to him as Tsar. He was simply Colonel Romanov. The imperial family found themselves devoid of all titles, confined within the walls of their own palace. Though officially held for their safety, the reality was evident. The Romanovs had turned into prisoners of the revolution they had not anticipated.
Your lineage is the only guarantee of
The provisional government truly worried about the safety of Nicholas II and his family. Russia had fractured into countless factions, some demanding justice through exile, while others called for Nicholas II to be executed. Alexander Kerensky, in an effort to avert violence, chose to maintain the Romanovs under watch at the Alexander Palace, providing them with a sense of dignity and safety during the turmoil.
Under the orders of Kerensky, the family experienced a time of relative peace. They kept some comforts from their past life and were allowed a bit of freedom within the palace grounds. Nicholas II often took walks in the gardens, rode on the nearby lake, and insisted on daily exercise. To those watching, he seemed serene and collected, almost thankful for the stillness following years of conflict and chaos. Nicholas II spent the majority of his days with his children, particularly his youngest daughter, Anastasia Romanov. She was full of life and wonder, frequently scaling trees or frolicking in the snow alongside her father. In captivity, their connection grew stronger. Released from the responsibilities of empire, Nicholas II transformed into a kinder individual, a loving husband and father who treasured each moment spent with his family. Alexandra Feodorovna, profoundly devoted, drew strength from her faith and prayers, firmly believing that their suffering held a divine purpose. The Romanovs held the belief that whatever happened to them was a manifestation of God's will, a test of their faith and resilience. They could not know at that time how severely that faith would soon be put to the test.
Following a number of months spent in a state of relative tranquility in St. Petersburg, the political climate throughout Russia began to escalate into violence. The revolution was spreading rapidly, and Alexander Kerensky understood it was just a matter of time before furious crowds arrived at Tsarskoye Selo. The palace was merely 15 miles from Petrograd, and whispers circulated that revolutionaries intended to storm it and pull Nicholas II and Alexandra Feodorovna into the streets. To prevent their capture or execution, Kerensky ordered that the Romanov family be moved far from the capital city. In the late summer of 1917, Nicholas II, Alexandra Feodorovna, Alexei Romanov, Anastasia Romanov, and the rest of the family were transported nearly 2,000 miles east to the remote Siberian town of Tobolsk.
This journey is necessary. Have faith, my daughter.
Tobolsk, which was once the capital of Siberia, was selected for its remote location. Snow and ice sealed the region off for much of the year, with its rivers frozen solid and no railway connection to the rest of Russia. Kerensky thought that the remoteness and severe weather would protect the Romanovs from the fury of revolution. The family found shelter in the governor's mansion, a humble yet cozy abode when set against the opulence of their previous palaces. For the very first time, the Romanovs experienced a life of quietude and simplicity. They prepared meals, shared stories, and offered prayers together. Nicholas II chopped firewood and took long walks with Anastasia Romanov and Alexei Romanov, while Alexandra Feodorovna tended to the children's education and wrote in her diary. Even when they lost their power, they discovered comfort in their togetherness. As long as they were together, hope continued to linger. But by the month of October, everything changed. The Bolshevik Party, under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin, toppled the provisional government of Alexander Kerensky and took control of Russia. The delicate shield that had safeguarded the Romanov family disappeared in an instant, and the looming presence of the Bolsheviks started to reach towards Tobolsk. The Bolsheviks, who later evolved into the Communist Party, were established by Vladimir Lenin in the year 1905. They ascended to power following the downfall of Nicholas II and the disintegration of Alexander Kerensky's temporary government. Their rule emerged from violence and was maintained by it, a regime fueled by the conviction that genuine authority could only be achieved through force. The Bolsheviks aimed to eliminate every remnant of the previous regime, and nothing represented that regime more than the Romanov family. For them, Nicholas II and Alexandra Feodorovna represented remnants of oppression, emblems of all that the revolution aimed to eliminate. They believed that their blood was the cost of the new world they were forging. In Tobolsk, as news of the Bolshevik rise spread, the Romanovs' hope of ever being released began to diminish. Yet, they held tightly to their faith and to one another. Nicholas II wrote in his diary that as long as they could stay together, they could withstand anything. Alexandra Feodorovna frequently shared with the children that their suffering held meaning and that love would guide them through. They would have been content to live quietly in exile, but the course of history had other plans.
eternal kingdom.
A civil war soon engulfed the country. Throughout Russia, intense clashes broke out between the Bolshevik Red Army and the anti-communist White Army, which aimed to bring back the monarchy. As the White forces moved closer to Tobolsk, the Bolsheviks, who were protecting the Romanovs, became overwhelmed with fear. Worried that loyalist troops might rescue the family, they commanded that Nicholas II, Alexandra Feodorovna, Alexei Romanov, Anastasia Romanov, and their relatives be relocated once more.
In the spring of 1918, the Romanovs were taken to the Ural city of Yekaterinburg, almost 1,500 miles from Moscow. There, they found themselves confined in a former merchant's residence, known as the Ipatiev House. The Bolsheviks gave it the name House of Special Purpose. Within its white walls, the imperial family stepped into the final, most tragic chapter of their lives, a chapter that would conclude with one of the darkest acts in Russian history. When the Romanov family reached Yekaterinburg, a tall wooden palisade was swiftly constructed around the Ipatiev house. It obstructed the view from the street, concealing the family from inquisitive onlookers and isolating them entirely from the outside world. Armed guards were stationed at every corner, advising locals to keep their distance. The Romanovs found themselves deprived of the scant comforts that remained to them. Their rooms were empty, their belongings taken away, and their movements strictly monitored. A small group of loyal attendants was permitted to remain with them, which included Alexandra Feodorovna's maid and Alexei Romanov's devoted physician, Dr. Eugene Botkin. The guards were always watching over the family. Even when Nicholas II or Alexandra Feodorovna stepped out of their chambers to wash or gather water, soldiers remained on guard. The atmosphere within the house felt heavy and oppressive. Food was rationed, letters were censored, and prayers were not allowed. The house itself had become a fortress, machine guns positioned in the attic, the garden, and even the basement. Nicholas II soon realized that their final hope of rescue was fading. He wrote of the increasing hostility surrounding them and of the feeling that death was approaching. The family had very little to do but to pray and wait.
The individual responsible for their confinement was Yakov Yurovsky, a devoted Bolshevik and passionate Marxist. Residents portrayed him as a frigid and perilous individual. Nicholas II noted in his writings that Yakov Yurovsky unsettled him deeply, referring to him as a man with evil in his eyes. Under Yurovsky's command, the Ipatiev house transformed into both a prison and a tomb in waiting. By the summer of 1918, the Romanov family had spent 78 long days within the confines of the Ipatiev house. The walls that surrounded them reverberated with tension and fear. They found themselves in isolation, under constant surveillance, and encircled by soldiers whose animosity intensified with every week that went by. Nicholas II and Alexandra Feodorovna felt that the peril surrounding them was tightening its grip. In the early days of July, the White Army forces were making their way towards Yekaterinburg, posing a threat to reclaim the city from the Bolsheviks. To the Romanovs, this presented a delicate glimmer of hope. Perhaps salvation was close at hand. But to Yakov Yurovsky, the commander in charge, it meant only one thing: the end was approaching, and he could not allow the imperial family to fall into the hands of their enemies. At approximately midnight on the 17th of July, the Romanovs were roused from their sleep and informed that they needed to be relocated without delay, as the city had turned perilous. Nicholas II, Alexandra Feodorovna, Alexei Romanov, Anastasia Romanov, and their attendants, hurriedly dressed, and were guided down to the basement, under the impression that they were awaiting transport to safety. The tiny, softly illuminated room felt suffocating. The family stood together, Nicholas II holding Alexei Romanov, Alexandra Feodorovna clutching the hand of Anastasia Romanov. Several chairs were arranged against the wall, and they were instructed to wait. Moments later, Yakov Yurovsky walked in, accompanied by a group of armed men. Yurovsky read aloud from a brief document. By order of the Ural Executive Committee, Nicholas Romanov, your family has been sentenced to death. In disbelief, Nicholas II requested that he repeat the words. Yurovsky did, and when he finished, he drew his Colt revolver and fired a single shot into the chest of Nicholas II. In a moment, chaos erupted. The soldiers began shooting in the tight basement. Bullets bounced off the walls, the noise overwhelming, the situation beyond belief. Within a few minutes, the echoes of gunfire faded away. The Romanov family, once the rulers of a vast empire, remained motionless. The House of Special Purpose had truly lived up to its name. When the gunfire finally ceased and the smoke began to clear, it became horrifyingly apparent that numerous members of the Romanov family were still alive. Nicholas II was killed instantly, as Yakov Yurovsky's men had aimed for him first. Yet the remainder of the family, Alexandra Feodorovna, Alexei Romanov, Anastasia Romanov, and the elder sisters were expressing their distress and turmoil in a state of confusion and pain. The room was filled with screams as the soldiers reloaded and fired once more. The two oldest daughters, Olga and Tatiana, held onto each other tightly as chaos broke out around them. The bullets bounced off the walls and even off the jewels stitched into the Grand Duchess's corsets, compelling the gunmen to turn to bayonets to complete their gruesome task. The scene was one of complete devastation, blood, smoke, and fear permeating every inch of the small basement. It was not an execution, it was a tragic event. As the final cries faded away, Yurovsky issued the command to take away the bodies. A Fiat truck was arranged and stood waiting outside the palisade, its engine humming softly in the night air. The soldiers carefully wrapped the bodies in sheets, loading them one by one into the back of the truck, which soon lurched forward under the heavy weight. The vehicle struggled through the mud and darkness for hours, heading 9 miles out of Yekaterinburg towards a desolate area known as the Four Brothers Mine in the Koptyaki forest. The soldiers had thought it was a deep pit, but when they got there, they discovered it was only a little more than 8 feet deep and half filled with stagnant water, far too shallow to hide the remains of the imperial family.
Yakov Yurovsky looked over the site with a sense of frustration. The plan was coming apart, the earth unsuitable to conceal their actions. He understood they would need to discover an alternative method to conceal the evidence of one of the most horrific crimes in Russia's past. The men returned at dawn the following day, pulled the bodies from the shallow, water-filled pit, and loaded them back into the Fiat truck amidst mud and stench, their plan unraveling as the countryside surrounding Yekaterinburg observed and murmured. The journey north was harsh and sluggish. The truck continually sank into the muck, and finally, Yakov Yurovsky, worn out and enraged, gave up on the initial plan and commanded that the remains be discarded where they rested, a choice made out of desperation rather than intention. In a grotesque attempt at concealment, The killers piled the corpses into the pit, covered them with wooden railway sleepers, and drove the truck repeatedly over the makeshift grave in a clumsy effort to press the bodies down and hide what they had done. The local authorities eventually acknowledged their role in the death of Nicholas II, yet they declined to clarify what happened to the rest of the family. This left the exact circumstances surrounding Alexandra Feodorovna, Alexei Romanov, and Anastasia Romanov enveloped in mystery and confusion. The local authorities eventually acknowledged their role in the death of Nicholas II, yet they declined to clarify what happened to the rest of the family. This left the exact circumstances surrounding Alexandra Feodorovna, Alexei Romanov, and Anastasia Romanov enveloped in mystery and confusion. For many years, the world engaged in discussions about whether any of the Romanovs had managed to escape that fateful night. The most well-known claimant, Anna Anderson, emerged from relative anonymity and claimed to be Anastasia Romanov, sparking public intrigue and heated debates in courts, while also capturing the interest of historians and everyday individuals alike.
Here she is, a living miracle.
In the months after the tragic events at the Ipatiev house, news rapidly circulated that Nicholas II had met his end. The Bolshevik authorities acknowledged his death but remained silent regarding Alexandra Feodorovna, Alexei Romanov, or the four Grand Duchesses. The quiet created space for speculation, and before long, people started to question if one or more of the Romanovs had managed to live on. In the months after the tragic events at the Ipatiev house, news rapidly circulated that Nicholas II had met his end. The Bolshevik authorities acknowledged his death but remained silent regarding Alexandra Feodorovna, Alexei Romanov, or the four Grand Duchesses. The quiet created space for speculation, and before long, people started to question if one or more of the Romanovs had managed to live on. Whispers spread across Europe that perhaps one of the Grand Duchesses, Anastasia Romanov, or Maria Romanov, or even Alexei Romanov himself, had been spirited away into hiding. The lack of official recognition from the Soviet government only intensified the ambiguity. By refusing to take responsibility for the fate of the whole family, the regime created a void that conspiracy and hope eagerly filled. For many years, the mystery lingered, appearing to be locked away within the chapters of history. But then, in the year 1920, a peculiar event reignited the legend. A young woman was discovered in Berlin, struggling with amnesia following what seemed to be a suicide attempt. She spoke German with a subtle Russian accent, carried no identification papers, and declined to disclose her name. The hospital staff just referred to her as Anna Anderson. Anna Anderson soon made a shocking declaration. She claimed to be Anastasia Romanov, the youngest daughter of Nicholas II and Alexandra Feodorovna. Her appearance, her mannerisms, her knowledge of palace life convinced a few that she might be telling the truth. Some regarded her as a fraud. For the remainder of her life, Anna Anderson existed in a space between uncertainty and loyalty. Admirers regarded her as the lost princess, whereas skeptics perceived her as a tragic woman engulfed by delusion. Her story would linger in the annals of history for many years, blurring the line between myth and reality in the lasting legend of Anastasia Romanov. The resemblance between Anna Anderson and Anastasia Romanov was truly undeniable. When photographs of a young Anastasia were compared with images of a middle-aged Anna Anderson, the resemblance was striking. Her bone structure, the shape of her eyes, Even her expressions all seemed hauntingly familiar. It was simple to see why so many were eager to accept her assertion.
Anderson shared a compelling tale. She had been saved by a humble peasant following the massacre, concealed among those who cared, and transported across Russia and Europe to find her freedom. The story captured imaginations all around, and for many years she remained steadfast in her belief. Even by 1968, more than 50 years after the tragedy in Yekaterinburg, Anna Anderson was still fighting to be recognized as Anastasia Romanov. She brought her case before the German courts, aiming for formal acknowledgement of her royal identity. The legal struggle continued for many years, splitting historians, journalists, and even individuals from the Russian émigré community. Supporters regarded her as the lost princess, while detractors perceived her as an impostor who had deceived the world. The controversy lasted for many years because people were eager to believe that at least one member of the Romanov family had lived on. In 100 years filled with war, revolution, and loss, the idea of a living princess felt like hope reborn. In the meantime, the authorities in the Soviet Union provided no explanation, choosing to stay quiet and allowing the West to speculate without end. Ultimately, the German courts rejected Anna Anderson's claim, pointing to insufficient evidence. Still, she never took back her words. Until her death in 1984, she held firmly to the belief that she was Anastasia Romanov. For many years, it appeared that the truth would stay hidden for all time, until deep within the forests of the Ural Mountains, an extraordinary discovery transformed everything. In 1991, following decades of silence and speculation, a Russian archaeologist unearthed what would turn out to be one of the most important discoveries in contemporary history. After years of careful research, he found a burial site close to Yekaterinburg, hidden deep in the woods, where Yakov Yurovsky's men had once fought to hide their wrongdoing. Underneath layers of soil and rubble, the excavation team discovered a number of skeletons. The remains matched the Romanov family in both count and condition: an adult male of Nicholas II's height, a woman consistent with Alexandra Feodorovna's age, and others corresponding to their daughters and attendants. Scientists declared with near certainty that these were the bones of the last imperial family of Russia. Yet even as the discovery appeared to unravel the mystery that had persisted for 100 years, a troubling detail came to light. 2 bodies were absent. Of the 11 anticipated remains, only 9 were discovered. The missing individuals were identified as Anastasia Romanov and her brother, Alexei Romanov. Their absence brought back the fires of legend.
Fragile hope for the dynasty, yet his fate.
The absence of the remains created uncertainty. Some believed that Anastasia Romanov and Alexei Romanov had been buried in a different location, while others thought that they had somehow managed to escape. The Russian government's inconsistent accounts of the burial fueled the speculation, and once more the world's fascination with the lost princess returned.
The disappearance of Anya Volenskaya remains one of the revolution's enduring mysteries.
If the whole family had been executed together in the basement of the Apatiev house, why had they not all been buried together? Historians have engaged in discussions about whether Yakov Yurovsky chose to burn or move the last 2 bodies apart to hide the evidence. For many years, this enigma kept alive the tale of Anastasia Romanov, a story that would not fade away.
To erase their memory, the bodies themselves had to vanish into the smoke.
In the years that came after the discovery, historians and those who witnessed the events brought back an old theory that Anastasia Romanov may have lived through the night of the execution. The chaos of the shooting at the Ipatiev house was so frenzied and disorganized that some believed it possible that a few members of the family might have still been alive after the initial volley. The individuals selected to carry out the killings were not trained soldiers but rather local revolutionaries, everyday workers and guards from Yekaterinburg. They found themselves lacking experience with firearms, feeling anxious, and ill-equipped for the terrifying task they had been commanded to undertake. Every individual was given a target, yet numerous people paused when it involved taking aim at the children. Their shots were unpredictable, and the smoke from the pistols filled the small basement, transforming it into a suffocating haze.
Witnesses would later claim the girls did not die.
Amidst the chaos, it is said that the Grand Duchesses were the final ones to succumb. Some witnesses later claimed that a number of the young women had not died immediately, that they had been shielded in part by something hidden beneath their clothes. Throughout their extended imprisonment, the Romanov daughters Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia Romanov were said to have stitched diamonds, rubies, and emeralds into the linings of their corsets. The jewels, intended to safeguard a small part of their wealth, might have served as a form of protection, diverting bullets and extending their agony.
Regardless of whether this account is completely true or somewhat mythical, it only intensified the lasting enigma surrounding the fate of Anastasia Romanov. Her name lingered through the ages, eternally positioned at the intersection of truth and myth. Certain historians hold the view that the Romanov daughters clung to hope, even in their last moments. They might have held on to the hope that salvation was close at hand and that the jewels stitched into their corsets would aid them in creating a new life if they were ever liberated. Yet, within that basement, the truth was much more terrifying.
The density here is remarkable.
Forensic evidence indicates that a number of the girls sustained injuries but were not killed immediately. Witness accounts describe chaos, the soldiers firing blindly in the smoke-filled room as bullets ricocheted off the hidden jewels. The killers, coming to the realization that their gunfire was not effective, resorted to using bayonets. Yet, even then, the weapons could not easily pierce the thick, jewel-lined fabric of the girls' clothing.
Yes, the reinforcing linen held firm, even against that much force.
It stands as one of the most tragic and disturbing details of that night. The very gems intended to protect the Romanov family's future had, instead, extended their suffering.
After 75 years, researchers looking back at the events in Yekaterinburg confirmed that the daughters' corsets were indeed lined with precious stones. That discovery brought back an even older legend that perhaps, in the chaos as the bodies were pulled from the cellar, one or two of the children might still have been alive.
Confirms the funds were accessed in 982.
Eyewitnesses reported that as the bodies were taken out, one of the Grand Duchesses, thought by some to be Anastasia Romanov, unexpectedly moved, sat up, and screamed, hiding her face with her hands before falling back down. Whether this was true or merely the result of grief, fear, and rumor, no one can say.
Causing panic among the firing squad.
The tale endured that a compassionate guard, appalled by the slaughter, might have secretly taken Anastasia Romanov or Alexei Romanov to safety beneath the veil of night. It was a story without evidence, yet it persisted, for the world yearned to believe that innocence had somehow evaded the massacre.
Was she the Grand Duchess?
It was not completely out of the question, many believed, that Anna Anderson could have been speaking the truth. Could she truly have been Anastasia Romanov, the final surviving Grand Duchess of Russia? For many years, the question remained unanswered until science eventually provided a means to reveal the truth. By 1994, advances in DNA technology enabled investigators to approach the mystery with newfound precision. Researchers found a preserved tissue sample taken from Anna Anderson 20 years earlier during a hospital surgery. For the very first time, they had the opportunity to test her genetic code and compare it directly to that of the Romanov family.
We just need a quick swab for
To
the
accomplish
HBR1
this,
sequence.
scientists required a living relative of the Romanovs who shared the same maternal bloodline as Alexandra Feodorovna. They looked to Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, the spouse of Queen Elizabeth II of Britain, whose lineage connected back to Alexandra through the same mitochondrial DNA line.
Samples from Prince Philip were compared to both the exhumed remains of the Romanov family and the preserved tissue of Anna Anderson. Following several months of thorough analysis, the results were revealed at an international press conference. The findings were clear and definitive. The DNA from Anna Anderson did not match that of Anastasia Romanov or any member of the imperial family. The long-discussed legend was finally put to rest. Anna Anderson was not Anastasia Romanov, and the tale that had enchanted the world for nearly 70 years had reached its conclusion not with a storybook survival, but with scientific certainty. The official results of the DNA testing left no room for uncertainty. The tissue sample taken from Anna Anderson revealed no genetic connection to Alexandra Feodorovna or to Prince Philip, whose DNA acted as the standard for the Romanov bloodline. Scientific analysis demonstrated without a doubt that Anna Anderson was not Anastasia Romanov. The tale that had captivated and split the world for the majority of the 20th century crumbled beneath the burden of proof. Whoever Anna Anderson truly was, she had not been born a member of the Romanov family. The DNA revealed her to be a Polish woman named Franziska Szankowska, born in the year 1896, who had endured significant trauma and psychological illness before making her way to Germany after the war. Even though the mystery surrounding Anastasia Romanov's identity had been resolved, another question lingered. Why were two of the Romanov children's bodies still absent from the burial site? The incomplete discovery caused concern for many, especially among the Russian Orthodox Church, which would not acknowledge the remains as authentic without definitive evidence. Nevertheless, in 1998, the remains identified as Nicholas II, Alexandra Feodorovna, and three of their daughters were reinterred in the Cathedral of Saints Peter and Paul in St. Petersburg. The ceremony saw the presence of members from the Russian government, along with surviving relatives of the Romanov family. Yet it unfolded without the approval of the Orthodox Church, which still refrained from giving its formal recognition. Even with overwhelming DNA evidence from laboratories in Russia, Britain, and the United States, doubt lingered. A number of Russians and the Church itself struggled to come to terms with the brutal killing of their Tsar, or the tragic conclusion of the Romanov saga. The Church announced that it would carry out its own investigation, looking for additional confirmation that the remains genuinely belonged to Nicholas II and his family. Yet for many around the world, the science had already spoken. The mystery of Anastasia Romanov was no longer a matter of belief, but of reality.
The East sought a different kind of truth.
Solving the mystery of Anna Anderson's identity had finally laid one legend to rest. But in doing so, it uncovered another question. If she had not been Anastasia Romanov, then where were the missing Romanov children? The quest for their ultimate resting place started once more, driven by the desire to reveal the truth that had escaped historians for almost 100 years.
They hoped to finally find the missing Romanov.
For over 15 years, groups of Russian scientists, archaeologists, and historians have searched the forests surrounding Yekaterinburg. A multitude of excavations came and went without success, until, at last, in 2007, an amateur archaeologist made a stunning discovery just 70 meters from the original burial site. Underneath the frozen earth rested a shallow pit that held the partial remains of two young people. One was a teenage boy, and the other was a girl thought to be somewhere between 17 and 20 years old. The findings aligned perfectly with the ages of Alexei Romanov and his sister, either Anastasia Romanov or Maria Romanov. Through the use of sophisticated forensic techniques, scientists from Russia were able to extract mitochondrial DNA from the shattered bone fragments. This genetic material, passed down solely through the maternal line, was compared with living relatives of Alexandra Feodorovna, such as Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. The results were clear. His DNA matched exactly with that of Alexandra Feodorovna and her daughters. The discovery confirmed what history had long suspected. All members of the Romanov family, including Alexei Romanov and Anastasia Romanov, had been murdered together in July of 1918 and buried separately to conceal the crime.
The young Tsarevich and his sister perished with their family in July 1918.
From the bloodshed of the Ipatiev basement to the
For more than
silence of the
70
crypt,
years, the fate of Nicholas II and his family has haunted the world, an open wound from the era of empires and revolutions. Their brutal deaths represented the downfall of an ancient dynasty and the emergence of a new, ruthless order.
May their memory be eternal.
In Russia, laying the Romanovs to rest was more than an act of burial. It was an act of reconciliation. As their remains were finally honored, a nation that had once erased them from memory began, at last, to confront the tragedy that had defined its modern history. After many years of conspiracies, false leads, and relentless press attention, it became easy to lose sight of what lay at the core of the Romanov story. Not politics or legend, but a family. Nicholas II, Alexandra Feodorovna, and their 5 children were not just symbols of an empire. They were a husband, a wife, and parents to 4 daughters and 1 son, whose lives concluded in one of the darkest chapters of Russia's past. Even now, there lingers a haunting sense of tragedy intertwined with romance regarding their fate, the quiet dignity of their final days, the innocence of the children, and the unbearable image of their suffering. It is perhaps human nature to want to believe that one of them, maybe Anastasia Romanov or Alexei Romanov, somehow escaped that terrible night and found refuge in the vast forests beyond Yekaterinburg.
The photographs of the imperial family still stir a sense of nostalgia. Nicholas II in his uniform, Alexandra Feodorovna's calm demeanor, the 4 Grand Duchesses, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia Romanov gathered together in matching white dresses and wide-brimmed hats, and young Alexei Romanov in his sailor suit. They seem so graceful, so unaffected by the violence that would take them away. To envision that anyone could unleash fire upon such beauty and innocence appears nearly unimaginable. Yet the reality remains. Beneath the myths and romantic retellings lies a brutal truth that this family's love, faith, and gentleness were extinguished by the very revolution they once hoped would bring peace to their people. And though their story concludes in tragedy, the legacy of Nicholas II, Alexandra Feodorovna, and their children lives on a reminder not only of the collapse of an empire, but of the lasting strength of love, faith, and the human yearning to hope against all odds.
The Romanov mystery sparked a
The
global
tragic killings
obsession,
of the
with
Romanov
countless
royal family
imposters
signaled the
emerging
start
across
of
the
a mystery
century,
that would
each claiming
captivate
to
the
be
world
lost
for almost
grandduchess.
100 years. Their deaths sparked hundreds of investigations, numerous newspaper stories, and an unending stream of imposters asserting they had survived the massacre. It felt like a dream that anyone could have gotten away, and yet the tale continued to live on. As time passed, the myths became more extravagant, the most well-known being that bullets had miraculously ricocheted off the Romanov daughters due to the jewels concealed in their corsets. In reality, there were no miraculous survivals, no heavenly safeguards. The tragedy remained not due to mystery, but rather because of chaos. The soldiers lacked training, the execution was chaotic, and the killings were tragically mishandled. Yet from that lack of skill came something surprising: perseverance. The tale of Nicholas II, Alexandra Feodorovna, Alexei Romanov, and Anastasia Romanov has endured well beyond their passing, passed down through the ages by those who found it impossible to reconcile such beauty and innocence being lost in such a tragic manner. Yet from that lack of skill came something surprising: perseverance. The tale of Nicholas II, Alexandra Feodorovna, Alexei Romanov, and Anastasia Romanov has endured well beyond their passing, passed down through the ages by those who found it impossible to reconcile such beauty and innocence being lost in such a tragic manner. In this moment, visitors find themselves enveloped in a quiet reverence as they stand before the Romanov tombs in St. Petersburg, where the family lies together at last. The myths and impostors have faded, yet the memory lingers, a testament to love, loss, and the lasting intrigue surrounding the final chapter of Russia's last imperial dynasty.